Everyone in Greylock prison saw her as the easiest target. A tiny, soft-spoken girl with round glasses, hair always tied too tight, clutching her tray like she was afraid it might fall apart. They called her Mouse. They pushed past her in the corridors. They stole food off her plate. They laughed when she apologized for things she didn't even do. And today, they decided to go further. 3 inmates cornered her near the laundry room. No guards, no cameras, just concrete walls and the smell of bleach. "Look at her trembling," one of them sneered. "She won't even squeak." They shoved her, hard. Her glasses cracked against the wall. She blinked, breath unsteady, hands shaking like she was on the verge of tears. The bullies smirked. Nothing was easier than breaking someone who didn't know how to fight back. But then she sighed, a slow, frustrated exhale. Not scared, not hurt, just disappointed. She reached up, removed her cracked glasses, and looked at them with eyes colder than steel. "Are we done?" she asked quietly. "Because I have a meeting, and I don't like being late." The inmates froze. That voice wasn't timid. That voice wasn't weak. That was the voice every gang leader in the prison feared. The voice they only ever heard in the dark, through rumors, when someone disappeared overnight. And before they could speak, a door at the end of the hall clicked open. 4 massive inmates stepped inside. Not guards. Her men. The ones who answered to the real authority in Greylock. The one nobody ever suspected. She wiped dust off her sleeve. "Take them," she said calmly. "They wanted to meet the real me." No one in that hallway laughed again. "Stay with me until the end, because what this weak girl does next will redefine everything you think you know about power in prison." Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, hit subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Now, let's get started. 6 months earlier, Elena Martinez had walked through those steel gates carrying nothing but a small canvas bag and a secret that would have made every inmate in Greylock drop to their knees. The paperwork said she was in for embezzlement, white-collar crime. Minimum security was full, so they shipped her to the big house where real criminals served real time. The intake officer barely glanced up from his computer screen as he processed the new arrival. Another scared little rich girl who got caught stealing from her company. Probably some accountant who skimmed money thinking she'd never get caught. Nothing dangerous about this one. Elena stood perfectly still during processing, her shoulders slightly hunched, eyes downcast. She answered questions in a voice so quiet the guards had to lean in to hear her. "Yes, sir. No, sir." She understood the rules. She wouldn't cause trouble. What they didn't know was that Elena Martinez wasn't just any embezzler. For 15 years, she had been the financial architect behind the most powerful crime syndicate on the East Coast. She had laundered millions, coordinated operations across 3 states, and built networks that reached into the highest levels of law enforcement and politics. She wasn't caught because she made a mistake. She was caught because someone she trusted decided her organization had grown too powerful, too dangerous. Someone who thought putting her behind bars would end the empire she had built from spreadsheets and silence. They were wrong. The first week at Greylock was exactly what everyone expected. Elena kept her head down, spoke only when spoken to, and moved through the prison like a ghost. Inmates noticed her, but only as prey, fresh meat, someone to test, to push around, to establish dominance over. She ate alone in the cafeteria, sitting at tables nobody wanted. She worked in the library, shelving books with methodical precision. She wrote letters that she never sent and read novels that made her look harmless, intellectual, weak. The established power structure at Greylock was simple enough. Big Martha controlled the drug trade. Her crew of loyal followers made sure contraband flowed through specific channels, at specific prices, with specific consequences for anyone who tried to compete. Diamond controlled protection. If you wanted to sleep safely, eat without harassment, or avoid finding a shiv between your ribs, you paid Diamond's crew their weekly tribute. And Razor controlled information. She knew who was snitching, who was planning escapes, who was moving money in and out of the prison. Knowledge was power, and Razor sold both to the highest bidder. These three women had divided Greylock into territories as clearly defined as any street map. They respected each other's boundaries, shared certain profits, and maintained the delicate balance that kept the prison from erupting into chaos. What none of them realized was that Elena had been studying their operation from the moment she arrived, not with the desperate attention of someone looking for protection, but with the calculating focus of someone evaluating a business acquisition. During her second week, Elena made her first move. It was so subtle that nobody noticed except the person it was meant for. She slipped a note under Big Martha's cell door during the night shift change. The note contained 3 pieces of information: the guard rotation schedule for the next month, the location of the warden's private safe, and the real name of the federal informant who had been feeding information to the FBI for the past 6 months. Big Martha found the note during morning inspection and nearly choked on her contraband cigarette. The information was impossible to get. The guard schedules were classified. The warden's safe location was known only to administration, and the identity of the federal informant was something even her best-connected sources couldn't confirm. But there it was, written in neat handwriting on plain paper. No signature, no demands, no threats. Just information that could change everything. Martha spent 3 days verifying the details through her network of corrupt guards and outside contacts. Every piece of information checked out perfectly. The guard rotation was accurate. The safe was exactly where the note said it would be, and the federal informant was indeed the person named on that paper. Someone in Greylock had access to intelligence that surpassed even her own carefully cultivated sources. Someone who understood that information was currency and had just made a significant deposit in her account. Martha began watching the other inmates more carefully, trying to identify her mysterious benefactor, but Elena had anticipated this response. She continued her routine of invisible compliance, never making eye contact, never drawing attention, never giving any indication that she was anything more than a frightened white-collar criminal counting down the days to release. The second note appeared a week later under Diamond's pillow. This one contained the floor plans for the new maximum security wing under construction. It showed weak points in the design, guard blind spots that would exist when the wing opened, and a detailed analysis of how the new layout would affect existing power structures in the prison. Diamond had been worried about the expansion for months. New territory meant new opportunities, but it also meant potential disruption of carefully negotiated boundaries. The information in the note was like having a crystal ball that revealed the future landscape of Greylock's underworld. She too spent days trying to verify the information through her connections with construction workers and administrative staff. Again, every detail proved accurate. Razor received her note 3 days after Diamond. It contained something that made her blood run cold. A complete dossier on her younger sister, who lived 3 states away under a different name. Photos of the sister's apartment, her work schedule, her daily routine. The message was clear without being threatening. I know things about you that nobody else knows. I can reach people you thought were safe. But at the bottom of the dossier was something unexpected. A bank account number and routing information. Razor checked the account and discovered it contained $50,000, deposited from an untraceable source. The money was accessible only with a password that had been written at the bottom of the note. Her sister's childhood nickname. This wasn't a threat. It was a demonstration. Someone had the resources to gather intelligence, move money, and coordinate operations from inside a maximum security prison. Someone who understood that loyalty was earned through competence, not fear. All 3 women began looking at their fellow inmates with new eyes, trying to identify the puppet master who was clearly operating in their midst. They questioned their lieutenants, reviewed security footage, and analyzed every interaction for clues. But Elena remained invisible. She continued her quiet routine, working in the library, eating alone, writing letters that never got sent. She had learned long ago that the most dangerous person in any room was often the one nobody noticed. The notes stopped coming, but their impact continued to ripple through Greylock's power structure. Big Martha found herself with intelligence advantages that helped her expand her operation. Diamond used the construction plans to position herself strategically for the new wing's opening. Razor used the money to improve her sister's security while building a debt of gratitude she couldn't identify. Each woman knew someone was pulling strings behind the scenes. Someone with resources, intelligence, and a level of operational sophistication that exceeded their own capabilities. But none of them could identify their mysterious benefactor, and none of them wanted to disrupt a relationship that was proving profitable. Elena had successfully established herself as a valuable but invisible asset to all three power brokers. She had demonstrated her capabilities without revealing her identity. She had created a network of obligation and curiosity that would serve her purposes when the time came to reveal herself. But first, she needed to deal with the small-time bullies who thought the quiet girl with the broken glasses was easy prey. Because in Elena's world, respect was non-negotiable, and those who mistook kindness for weakness needed to learn the difference. The three bullies who had cornered Elena near the laundry room were named Tessa, Brick, and Snake. They had been running their own small-time operation for months, targeting newer inmates and anyone who looked vulnerable. Their methods were simple but effective. Find someone weak, establish dominance through violence, and extract whatever they could through fear. Tessa was the leader, a wiry woman with sharp features and dead eyes who had been in and out of the system since she was 16. She specialized in psychological intimidation, breaking people down mentally before the physical abuse even started. Brick got her nickname from her preferred method of problem-solving. She was built like a refrigerator and had the intellectual capacity to match. When Tessa pointed at someone, Brick hit them hard. Snake was the information gatherer, the one who identified targets and learned their weaknesses before the crew moved in. They had been watching Elena for weeks, cataloging her routines, noting her isolation, marking her as perfect prey. A scared little white girl with no connections, no protection, and no backbone. The kind of mark that made their reputation while padding their commissary accounts. But as they stood in that laundry room, staring at the four massive inmates who had appeared like shadows made flesh, they began to understand that they had made a catastrophic miscalculation. The four men who entered weren't just big, they were predators, the kind of lifers who had survived decades in maximum security by being smarter and more ruthless than everyone around them. Their leader was a mountain of a man called Diesel, whose arms were covered in tattoos that told the story of bodies buried and territories conquered. Behind him came Frost, pale as winter and twice as cold, whose reputation for creative violence had made him a legend in 3 different prisons. Then Tank, whose nickname came not from his size but from his ability to roll through opposition like armored warfare. And finally Ghost, who moved so quietly that guards had been known to count him twice during head counts, convinced he had somehow multiplied. These weren't random muscle. These were Elena's personal enforcement team, men who had sworn loyalty not to a gang or a territory, but to a person whose reach extended far beyond these concrete walls. Tessa tried to speak, but her voice cracked like a teenager asking someone to prom. We didn't know she was connected. This was just a misunderstanding. Elena stepped forward, still holding her broken glasses, her voice carrying the kind of authority that made federal judges nervous. There's no misunderstanding here. You wanted to establish dominance. You wanted to show everyone what happens when someone looks weak in your territory. You got exactly what you asked for. She gestured to Diesel, who moved forward with the fluid grace of someone who had perfected violence as an art form. The question now is whether you learn from this experience, or whether you become an example for others. Snake backed against the wall, her information-gathering instincts finally providing useful data. Too late, but useful. These weren't just connected inmates. This was a military operation with Elena at the center, coordinating movements and decisions with the precision of someone who had commanded respect long before she ever saw the inside of a cell. Brick, true to form, decided that the best response to an impossible situation was to charge straight through it. She lunged toward Elena, her massive fists swinging with enough force to cave in ribs. It was exactly the kind of move that had worked for her countless times before, against terrified victims who had nowhere to run. Ghost materialized beside her like smoke given form. His hand caught her wrist mid-swing, and the sound of breaking bone echoed off the concrete walls like a gunshot. Brick dropped to her knees, screaming, her dominant hand twisted at an angle that defied human anatomy. Tessa and Snake stood frozen, watching their muscle reduce to a sobbing wreck in less than 3 seconds. The casual efficiency of it was more terrifying than any display of rage could have been. This wasn't emotional violence. This was professional consultation being delivered by experts in their field. Elena walked over to where Brick knelt, her broken glasses held loosely in one hand like a prop in a theater performance. You wanted to hurt me because you thought I was weak. But weakness and strength aren't about size or noise or how many people you can intimidate. They're about understanding power and knowing how to use it. She knelt down until she was eye level with Brick, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than any shout. I've been moving money, coordinating operations, and eliminating problems since before you learned how to throw a punch. The only reason you're still breathing is because killing you would be inconvenient for my schedule. Tank moved to block the doorway, his presence ensuring that this conversation would continue until Elena decided it was finished. Frost positioned himself near the laundry machines, cutting off any potential escape route. These weren't random placements. This was tactical positioning that spoke of planning and coordination that went far beyond prison yard politics. Tessa finally found her voice, though it came out smaller than she intended. What do you want from us? Elena stood up, brushing imaginary dust off her prison uniform. I want you to understand something that will save your life, and probably the lives of several other people in this prison. I don't run a gang. I don't control territory. I don't sell protection or drugs or information. She paused, letting the words settle in the concrete enclosed space. I am the ecosystem. Every operation in this prison exists because I allow it to exist. Every deal gets made because I've decided it serves my interests. Every problem gets solved because I've determined the solution benefits my objectives. Snake's eyes widened as pieces of a puzzle she hadn't known she was solving suddenly clicked into place. The mysterious notes that had been appearing throughout the prison, the intelligence that seemed to come from nowhere, the way certain problems just disappeared overnight without explanation. You're the one, Snake whispered. You've been pulling the strings this whole time. Elena smiled, and for the first time since entering Greylock, she looked genuinely pleased. Now you're starting to understand. The question is whether that understanding comes with wisdom or just fear. Diesel stepped forward, his massive frame casting shadows that seemed to swallow the fluorescent lighting. Boss, how do you want to handle this? The casual use of the title sent a chill through the 3 women that had nothing to do with the prison's air conditioning. This wasn't just respect. This was military structure. Elena wasn't just connected to dangerous people. She commanded them. Elena looked at each of the 3 bullies in turn, her expression thoughtful, like a chess master considering her next several moves simultaneously. Tessa, you understand psychology. You know how to read people, how to find their pressure points. That's a useful skill when it's directed properly. Tessa nodded quickly, sensing an opportunity. In the words, but afraid to hope for anything resembling mercy. Snake, you gather information. You notice things other people miss. You understand that knowledge is power when it's used correctly. Snake managed a weak nod, her mind racing through implications and possibilities. And Brick, Elena looked down at the woman still clutching her broken wrist. You're loyal to your crew, and you're not afraid to take action when action is required. Those are admirable qualities in the right context. She walked to the center of the room, her presence somehow making the space feel both larger and more confined at the same time. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to work for me now, not because I'm threatening you, though I certainly could. Not because I'm bribing you, though I have resources that would surprise you. You're going to work for me because it's the intelligent choice, and I believe you're all intelligent enough to recognize opportunity when it's standing in front of you. The offer hung in the air like smoke from a fire that hadn't been lit yet. It was generous and terrifying in equal measure, the kind of proposition that changed the entire trajectory of a person's incarceration. "What kind of work?" Tessa asked, her voice steadier now that she sensed survival was possible. "The same work you've been doing, but with better targets and bigger rewards. You've been running a small-time operation focused on individual inmates with lunch money and commissary accounts. I'm offering you the chance to participate in something that moves real money and solves real problems." Elena gestured to Ghost, who produced a small notebook from inside his uniform and handed it to her with the efficiency of a well-trained assistant. "There are 17 different operations running in this prison right now. Drug distribution, weapon manufacturing, money laundering, information brokering, protection services, contraband smuggling, and several others I won't detail because you don't have clearance for that information yet." She opened the notebook and ran her finger down a page filled with neat handwriting and precise diagrams. "Every single one of these operations reports to me, not because I forced them to, but because I made their operations more profitable, more secure, and more sustainable than they could ever be on their own. I provide coordination, intelligence, resources, and protection that transforms small-time criminal activity into professional enterprise." Enterprise. Brick stared at the notebook in Elena's hands, like it contained nuclear launch codes. "You're saying you run everything?" "I'm saying I coordinate everything," Elena corrected, her voice carrying the patience of someone explaining basic math to a child. "There's a difference between controlling through fear and organizing through mutual benefit. Fear breaks down. Profit endures." She closed the notebook and handed it back to Ghost, who made it disappear as efficiently as he had produced it. "Big Martha thinks she runs the drug trade because she's the face everyone sees. Diamond believes she controls protection because inmates pay her crew directly. Razor assumes she owns information because people come to her with questions." Elena walked to one of the industrial washing machines, running her fingers along its metal surface like she was reading Braille. "What none of them understand is that I've been facilitating their success from the beginning. Martha's supply chain works because I've neutralized the competition and provided her with intelligence about guard movements. Diamond's protection racket thrives because I've identified which inmates need protection and ensured they have the resources to pay for it. Razor's information network functions because I've been feeding her carefully selected intelligence that makes her appear more connected than she actually is." Snake's mouth fell open as the full scope of Elena's operation became clear. "You've been playing all of them." "I've been helping all of them," Elena said firmly. "There's a fundamental difference between manipulation and coordination. Manipulation creates enemies. Coordination creates partners. And partners are much more valuable than enemies when you're building something that needs to last." Frost moved slightly, his presence reminding everyone that this conversation was taking place under very specific circumstances. His pale eyes tracked every movement, every expression, cataloging threats and opportunities with the mechanical precision of someone who had survived this long by never missing details. "The three of you have been operating like amateurs," Elena continued, her assessment clinical rather than cruel. "You identify targets based on appearance rather than intelligence. You use violence as a first option rather than a last resort. You take whatever you can get instead of building sustainable revenue streams." She turned back to face them, her broken glasses catching the fluorescent light. "That approach might work for a few months, maybe even a year, but it's not scalable. It's not professional. and it's certainly not profitable in any meaningful sense. Tank shifted his weight, the movement causing the entire room to feel somehow smaller. Boss, we could use them in the new operation. Elena nodded slowly, considering the suggestion. The commissary expansion project. Yes, that could work. Tessa found her voice again, curiosity overcoming fear. What kind of expansion project? The prison administration is implementing a new digital commissary system next month, Elena explained, her tone shifting into something that sounded almost like a business presentation. Inmates will be able to place orders through tablets, track deliveries, and manage their accounts electronically. It's supposed to improve efficiency and reduce contraband smuggling. She paused, letting the implications sink in. Of course, any digital system can be manipulated if you understand its weaknesses, and any new process creates opportunities for those who position themselves correctly. Ghost stepped forward, producing a small tablet from somewhere in his uniform. The device looked standard issue, but something about the way he handled it suggested modifications that weren't part of the original design. We've been testing the beta version for 3 weeks, Elena continued. The security protocols are adequate for preventing casual interference, but they're completely inadequate for stopping someone with the right resources and knowledge. Snake leaned forward despite herself, her information-gathering instincts overriding her fear. You're going to hack the commissary system? We're going to improve the commissary system, Elena corrected. The current design has several inefficiencies that create unnecessary friction in the purchasing process. We're simply going to streamline those inefficiencies in ways that benefit everyone involved. Diesel cracked his knuckles, the sound echoing off the concrete walls like small explosions. Translation: we're going to skim percentages off every transaction and redirect surplus inventory to our own distribution network. Elena shot him a look that suggested such crude summaries weren't helpful for recruitment purposes. What Diesel means is that we're going to create additional revenue streams that don't disrupt existing operations while providing enhanced services to the inmate population. She walked back to the center of the room, her presence commanding attention without demanding it. The beauty of this particular operation is that it requires exactly the skills the three of you have been developing. Tessa, we need someone who can identify which inmates have money but aren't spending it effectively. Snake, we need intelligence about purchasing patterns and potential security vulnerabilities. And Brick, we need someone who can ensure that modified inventory reaches its intended recipients without interference. The offer was more generous than anything they could have hoped for when they first cornered the quiet girl with the broken glasses. Elena was essentially inviting them into an operation that would multiply their earning potential by factors they couldn't even calculate. But there was something in her tone that suggested the invitation came with expectations that went far beyond simple participation. "What's the catch?" Tessa asked, her psychological training telling her that offers this good always came with hidden costs. "The catch is that you work for me now," Elena said simply. "Not with me, for me. That means your small-time bullying operation ends immediately. Your freelance intimidation services are discontinued. Your independent targeting of vulnerable inmates stops today." She gestured to her 4 enforcers, who somehow managed to look even more intimidating while standing perfectly still. "It means that, when I give you instructions, you follow them precisely and without question. It means that when problems arise, you solve them using the methods I approve rather than the methods you prefer. And it means that your loyalty belongs to this organization rather than to your own immediate interests." The terms were clear, comprehensive, and completely non-negotiable. Elena wasn't offering them a partnership. She was offering them employment in an organization that operated according to her standards and her objectives. "What if we say no?" Brick asked, though her broken wrist suggested she already knew the answer. Elena's expression didn't change, but somehow the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. "Then you leave this room and pretend this conversation never happened. You continue your small-time operation until someone bigger and less reasonable decides to eliminate the competition. You serve out your sentences, hoping that none of the people you've bullied decide to seek revenge. She paused, letting the alternatives settle in their minds. Or until the administration decides that your activities are disruptive enough to warrant transfer to a facility where your current skill set would be considerably less effective. Tank moved slightly, blocking the doorway more completely, though Elena hadn't given any visible signal for him to do so. The coordination was seamless, suggesting rehearsal and preparation that went far beyond this particular conversation. But if you say yes, Elena continued, you become part of something that extends far beyond these walls. You develop skills that will serve you long after you're released. You build connections that will provide opportunities and protection for years to come. And you earn money that makes your current operation look like children selling lemonade. She reached into her pocket and produced 3 small photographs, handing one to each of the women. The images showed bank account balances with numbers that made their commissary earnings look like pocket change. These accounts belong to former inmates who worked for me in other facilities, Elena explained. They were released with resources that allowed them to start legitimate businesses, purchase property, and build lives that don't require them to return to criminal activity. Snake stared at her photograph, trying to process numbers that seemed too large to be real. This is really what they earned? This is really what they earned, Elena confirmed. And this is what you could earn if you demonstrate the same level of competence and loyalty that they showed during their time with the organization. The photographs represented more money than any of them had ever seen in one place. More money than they had imagined could be earned through prison operations. More money than they had thought possible for people like them. But Elena's next words reminded them that everything valuable came with a price. Of course, these rewards are contingent on performance. The organization invests heavily in its people, but it expects returns on those investments. Failure to meet expectations, betrayal of trust, or attempts to operate independently while using organizational resources result in consequences that are significantly more severe than anything you've experienced from other inmates or prison administration. Frost stepped forward slightly, his pale features arranged in something that might have been a smile, if smiles could freeze blood. The message was clear without being explicit. Elena's organization offered unprecedented opportunities, but it also demanded unprecedented loyalty. How long do we have to decide? Tessa asked, though her tone suggested she was already leaning toward acceptance. You decide now, Elena said simply. This isn't the kind of offer that comes with a grace period for consideration. Either you trust that this opportunity is worth the risks, or you don't. Either you're ready to operate at a professional level, or you're not. She walked back toward the door, her movement suggesting that the conversation was approaching its conclusion regardless of their decision. But understand that once you're part of this organization, you're part of it permanently. There's no resignation process. There's no retirement plan. There's no transfer to a different department. You work for me until your sentence is complete, and then you work for me on the outside using the skills and connections you've developed here. The finality of the commitment was sobering, but so was the alternative. They could return to their small-time operation and hope for the best, or they could join something that offered real power and real money in exchange for real loyalty. Elena stopped at the doorway, turning back to face them one final time. What's it going to be? Snake looked down at the photograph in her trembling hands, then at Tessa, who was staring at Elena with something approaching reverence. Even Brick, clutching her broken wrist, managed to nod through her pain. We're in, Tessa said, her voice steady for the first time since they'd entered that laundry room. All of us. Elena smiled, and for a moment she looked exactly like the harmless girl everyone thought they knew. Then the mask slipped back into place, revealing the calculating intelligence that had built an empire from shadows and silence. Welcome to the organization, she said simply. Ghost will provide you with your first assignments tomorrow. Don't disappoint me. As Elena walked toward the exit, she paused to pick up her broken glasses from the floor. She held them up to the light, examining the cracked lenses with the same careful attention she gave everything else. "You know," she said conversationally, "I actually have perfect vision. These glasses were just part of the costume." She dropped the broken frames into a nearby trash bin. "I won't be needing them anymore." The door closed behind her and her enforcers, leaving the three former bullies alone with the realization that they had just witnessed the moment when Greylock's hidden queen decided to step out of the shadows. From that day forward, every inmate in the prison would know exactly who really controlled their world. And Elena Martinez had just proven that the most dangerous person in any room is always the one nobody suspects. Sometimes the greatest power comes from being underestimated, and the smartest predators are the ones who convince everyone they're prey. Remember that the next time you think you know who's really in charge.